he was worshipped like a god. Louis XIV, the Sun King, the most powerful monarch in Europe, and, by all accounts, the most beautiful. 6 feet tall, eyes like polished sapphires, hair like obsidian silk. When he entered a room, silence fell. When he danced, it was as if gravity forgot him. When he spoke, his voice was command. They called him Apollo, the divine body, the God King. And yet, this man who ruled as the sun itself would die a horror show, rotting alive, toothless, screaming, exploding. But before the nightmare, there was the myth. Versailles, May 1661. 1,000 candles flickered across gold leaf walls. 357 Venetian mirrors multiplied his image into infinity. Louis appeared at the top of the staircase, only 23, draped in robes embroidered with gold thread, so heavy they weighed 33 pounds. 5,000 courtiers froze. The air itself seemed to stop. Light caught him, a sunbeam through stained glass. His body glowed like a statue that had come alive. This wasn't a man. It was a myth, walking through marble. But even then, something was wrong, because Louis wasn't just a king, he was a performance, and Versailles wasn't a palace. It was a stage, every movement rehearsed, every gesture propaganda, every ritual, a lie to convince the world that the divine body could never fail. But beneath the silks, it already had. Versailles dazzled the world. But beneath the marble and gold, it stank. Sweat, smoke, rot. Not just in the palace, in the body of the man who built it. Because Louis XIV, this shining god king, believed something dangerous. So did his doctors, so did most of Europe. That water was evil. Bathing, they said, opened the pores, and with it, the door to illness, or worse, spirits. So the most powerful man in Europe refused to wash. Not laziness, not arrogance, but obedience to medicine. Louis washed only his hands and face each morning. The rest of him, never. His skin sweated, cracked, bled, covered in white lead powder and rouge, garments soaked in perspiration, never fully cleaned. Under the silks, his body stewed, and in the warmth of unwashed flesh, something began to grow. It started with whispers, not from courtiers, from his body, a soreness near the spine, a tightness he'd never felt before. The physician dismissed it, just irritation, from too much riding. Louis believed him, even as courtiers fainted from the king's stench, even as incense burned night and day. The truth spread quietly, like mold behind a wall. By the time he mentioned the pain again, it had grown to the size of a walnut. He could no longer sit for long without cushions, and there was a new odor, wet, metallic, sour. One courtier wrote, "It clings to him like a ghost." The divine body had been breached, and what spread inside it would never close. The king was leaking. What began as a soreness had torn open into a fistula, an infected tunnel beneath the skin. Blood, pus, and feces oozed into his robes every hour. Still, Louis smiled. Still Versailles pretended, but courtiers now carried perfumed handkerchiefs at their noses. And behind the scenes, his physician grew desperate. First came the enemas. 2, 3, 4 a day. Cold water, wine, herbs, flushed into him endlessly. In the belief illness came from within, they only tortured him. So came bloodletting, 1/2 liter a day. Ceramic bowls filled with royal blood, until his skin turned pale and his hands shook. When that failed, the final weapon, cautery, iron rods, heated until they glowed, pressed into the wound to burn away the poison. 4 men held Louis down, a block wedged between his teeth. As the metal touched flesh, he howled. Not the cries of a king. Animal screams that tore through the marble halls. Servants fainted. Chambermaids fled. When the bandages were peeled away, nurses found blackened tissue, dark green pus, a stench like burnt oil and sewage. And still Versailles carried on. The lever, the coucher, the rituals of glory, as if nothing had changed. But everyone knew, Louis XIV, the Sun King, was rotting alive. By 1686, the king's agony was constant. He could no longer sit, ride, or eat without pain. The palace stank of rot. At last the doctors admitted it. The king must be cut. They summoned a surgeon, Charles Francois Felix, not a noble, not a courtier, a craftsman with a blade. But Felix knew the truth. If he failed, he died. So he practiced. On prisoners, on paupers, on men dragged into hidden chambers, cut open without mercy. Dozens suffered so that Felix could sharpen one technique, He built a curved scalpel, a tool designed to reach deep into the king's wound without killing him. He called it l'ustensile royal, the royal instrument. November 1686. Versailles sealed its doors. Louis lay awake on a silk-covered table. No anesthesia, only a wooden block for his teeth. Felix sliced. The blade cut through pus-filled tissue. A geyser erupted. Dark, fetid fluid sprayed across the room. Assistants vomited. One fled, but Felix kept going. Layer by layer, he carved until he struck bone. The infection had reached the sacrum. Louis groaned, seized, wept, but he did not faint. 3 hours later, a wine bowl's worth of flesh had been cut away, the sheets drenched in blood, the air thick with rot and wax, and when it ended, the king was still alive. Not healed, but alive. Louis XIV survived the knife, but he did not heal. The wound refused to close, and what it left behind was worse than pain. He leaked, constantly, feces, pus, blood, soaking his robes, staining his sheets, trailing behind him in sour ribbons. The courtiers called it royal seepage, but everyone knew what it meant. The throne itself was rotting. Versailles adapted. A new throne was carved. Walnut, silk, and a hidden opening in the cushion for drainage. Custom padding in every chair, undergarments stuffed with absorbent linen, even the royal carriage rebuilt to cradle the wound. Still, the king smiled. Still he ruled, but every ceremony now carried a secret code. If he soiled himself during an audience, attendants whispered, "L'ombre est tombée," the shadow has fallen. Within seconds curtains closed, music swelled. The king disappeared behind silk screens while servants changed his garments. To outsiders, Versailles shimmered, banquets, processions, rituals of glory, but the truth was sour in the air. Perfume fountains ran day and night, candles of rosewater and beeswax burned to ash. Courtiers pressed vinegar-soaked cloths to their noses. They weren't honoring a king anymore. They were maintaining a corpse that hadn't died yet. The Sun King's body had betrayed him from below. Now it turned against him from above. His mouth, by now his gums bled. His teeth rotted black. Every meal brought pain. And then came Dr. Antoine d'Aquin, a man convinced all disease began in the mouth. His solution? Remove the king's teeth. All of them. No anesthesia, no antiseptic, only iron pliers. The first molar cracked like porcelain, then another, and another. Blood sprayed down the king's neck. His screams shook the stone halls. Then d'Aquin gripped an incisor and pulled bone with it. A chunk of skull tore free. He had opened a hole between mouth and nose. From that day forward, whenever Louis drank wine, it poured back out of his nose. His jaw fractured. His lips swelled. His speech slurred into wet gurgles. Food fell from his mouth. He drooled constantly. Still, Versailles masked it. Cravats to hide the spit. Scripts prepared in advance so he could nod instead of speak. Straws custom-made to drink without humiliation. But the mask slipped. The English ambassador called him a wheezing ghost wrapped in perfume. The Spanish envoy wrote, "The king's mouth leaks wine and words in equal measure," and the Venetians said simply, "He speaks as if the grave were already between his teeth." The God-King was falling apart, piece by piece. August 1715. Louis XIV, 76 years old, awoke with fire in his left leg. Not cramps, not sciatica, as his doctor claimed. Gangrene. By mid-August, the big toe turned purple. By the 18th, it was black. By the 25th, it detached, falling to the floor with a dull bounce. The chamber froze in silence. One courtier vomited, and still Louis said nothing. He gestured for the stocking to be replaced. The rot spread. The skin cracked like burnt leather. Dark liquid oozed from the wounds. The smell filled entire halls. Servants fainted. Dogs whined outside the chamber. Even perfumers could not mask it. Foreign diplomats began requesting outdoor audiences, not for ceremony, for survival, but amputation was forbidden. "How can you cut God?" they whispered. Louis himself refused. "If God wills my leg to die, he will take it. I will not." By the end of August, the leg was no longer a leg, a mass of rot, green pus, chunks of flesh sloughing away like bark from a dying tree. And still he ruled. He signed decrees. He received ambassadors. He dictated war. all while the most powerful monarch in Europe rotted alive, inches at a time. August 31st, 1715, Versailles was silent. Inside the king's chamber, only a rasping breath, like wind through torn silk. Louis XIV had entered his final night, his skin grey, his lips cracked, his leg little more than rot, but his mind was still clear. He called for one person, his great-grandson, the 5-year-old who would become Louis XV. The boy was placed beside the bed. Louis leaned forward, his voice crumbling like parchment. "Do not imitate me. I have loved war too much." Those were his last words. Hours passed. His breath slowed, shallower, weaker. At dawn, September 1st, 1715, the Sun King died. But even in death, his body betrayed him. Within hours, decomposition set in. The corpse bloated, gases hissed through torn flesh, fluids leaked into silk. Doctors rushed to perform the autopsy before the body dissolved. What they found was worse than rumor. Every organ scarred by infection, the leg, bowel, and spine blackened. A tapeworm, 12 feet long, coiled in his gut. Embalmers tried to preserve him, but the body burst. Flesh peeled from the face. The belly split. Perfume poured on by the bucketful could not contain the smell. When the coffin was sealed, guests reported hearing it hiss, as if the king was boiling inside. And yet the official announcement was simple. His Majesty died peacefully in his sleep. The last lie Versailles ever told. September 2nd, 1715. Within a day of Louis XIV's death, Versailles went into lockdown. Not for mourning, for erasure. Medical records burned. Surgical notes vanished. The autopsy locked away for centuries. Paintings retouched. Letters intercepted. Courtiers threatened into silence. The thousands of pounds spent on perfume, incense and silk padding to mask the king's decay, erased from the books. And in their place, a new story was written. Louis XIV, the greatest monarch of Europe, passed peacefully into the arms of God, beloved by his people and admired by the world. A lie so complete, it lasted for generations. But some truths rot too loudly to stay buried. Historians eventually uncovered the lost records. The journals, the autopsy report. Piece by piece, they revealed what really happened. The pulse, the screams, the toothless mouth, the rotting leg, the corpse boiling inside a sealed coffin. It wasn't just a medical tragedy, it was the collapse of a myth. Louis XIV built Versailles to embody perfection. In the end, it became his prison, because when power is absolute, truth itself becomes treason. Louis XIV ruled for 72 years. He built Versailles to outlast him, a palace of mirrors, marble, and myth, a place where the king was not a man, but the sun itself. But in the end, the Sun King rotted like anyone else. His throne leaked pus. His teeth fell out. His leg turned black. His corpse burst inside its coffin. And no ritual, no perfume, no hymn could disguise the truth. Even kings decay. That is the lesson Versailles tried to bury. That absolute power cannot conquer the body. That the image of glory can outlive the flesh. But only as a mask painted over horror. Louis's monuments still stand. The gardens bloom. Tourists marvel at the gilded halls. But if you listen closely in the quiet of Versailles, past the music and fountains, past the polished floors and painted ceilings, you might imagine the smell that once filled these rooms. You might hear the muffled screams behind velvet curtains, and you might remember that history is not just what empires build, it is also what they rot. The Sun King believed he was eternal, but his body told the truth, and the truth still stinks. If this story made you rethink everything you've heard about royalty, subscribe to Shrouded History for more dark, hidden and brutally human stories from the past. And let us know in the comments, which king, queen or forgotten figure should we investigate next?